more of a sorting process this year because of the cap situation, or not?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I still think we'll have probably 11 to 13 returning players, but there's a lot of moving parts, and I suspect we're not going to know the final roster until they get down to their numbers. So we anticipate a few more bodies arriving, by Wednesday, and then they're going to probably get down to 28 or 29 till when the NHL rosters do.
So is it too early? What will be the difference between last year's team and this year's team?
Yeah, I think so, because we just there's a lot of moving parts, and we're just not quite sure where we're going to be at, especially from the forwards perspective. I think defense, we kind of know what's going on, and we got a couple of Hershey guys battling it up there, and we suspect we're going to lose 2 from last year's Hershey Bears team. But there's a lot of more fluidity within the forward ranks for sure.
When you have some PTO guys come in like a Matt Kerry, what are you looking for from those guys on at least the first day of camp?
Well, I think, one, it covers us in terms of something that changes in Washington, whether there's injuries. There's going to be a couple waiver cases, and you never know what's going to happen with that. So we just wanted to get a little bit more experience in here, and it was a tough summer across the board for a number of players. Even a couple of our own guys had to wait to the last minute to earn a contract or even PTOs. So there was a number of quality players available towards the end, and we were able to bring a couple guys in here as insurance. And certainly if they play well and our roster number is reasonable, maybe there's another contract to be earned there.
What does a guy like Kerry bring to this team for you?
Well, certainly from our perspective right now, and it's early, I think scoring from the forwards ranks is a little bit of a concern from us right now. If you look at the number of goals and skill level that we lost from last year's team, so he was able to get 20-odd goals in Hartford last year, and the Langlois kid as well. He maybe struggled offensively a little bit last year, but he was very impressive in the Worcester year there when we played them in playoffs, and he brings a tremendous amount of speed, which might be a concern up front as well, depending how the numbers play out. So just a couple of different areas, from scoring to speed that they bring to the table, and we'll see. We'll try and get them in both preseason games, and maybe one of those guys are able to earn themselves a contract.
Troy, for day one of camp, you try to set a tone or send a message?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did a number of things that we thought we wanted to cover here. We're a big coaching staff that loves small area games. We think that really helps the offensive part of the game, and we try to mix into that. Obviously, a little bit of a different schedule this year with us playing Wednesday instead of Saturday, Sunday last year. So you got to get into special teams right away, where maybe a year ago we were able to wait till later in the week to touch on special teams. So we had to hit that pretty hard here today, because we want some kind of structure going into that game Wednesday in terms of power play, killing, and then we have to get the PTO guys up to speed on system play. 80% of our game is identical to Washington, so the 15 guys that came from Washington are pretty much set when it comes to system play. But we did, there are 3 different areas that were different than Washington. The power play, that's all personnel related. We're different than Washington. Our offensive zone concepts are a little bit different, and then our forecheck, there's a tweak to our forecheck. So in terms of the group today, we did cover the forecheck, and then we'll pull the PTO guys aside in here and try and give them as much information as we can here going into Wednesday.
When you eventually have everybody together, will there be a message about what happened last year, that you've got to keep your foot on the gas so you're not playing playoff hockey starting in February?
No, absolutely. I mean, October 6th, we have a meeting planned here after practice before we, start the season, and we'll go over some of the stats from last year, not only from a team perspective or this power play PK, but we're certainly going to go over the divisional stats, the winning percentage it took to get in the playoffs, the number of wins that we think it takes to get home ice advantage in the playoffs, wins and losses on the road. And then we'll go from there, because you're absolutely right. I expect the division to be even stronger this year. Providence has got some great young players. Goaltending tandem's identical. Wilkes-Barre's always strong. Lehigh Valley, I think with the number of prospects they have coming into the fold and the number of vets they have back from last year's team, they should be good or better. Bridgeport's always tough. And then we've got a new team from Charlotte that has a lot of good young hockey players in the system. So, and there's no crossover. So it's going to be even more difficult to make playoffs this year.
As a coach, what do you take away and what do you try and do in terms of evaluating guys in Arlington compared to evaluating guys and working with guys here?
Well, I think that, we certainly know what a good chunk of our roster brings to the table. Two things we tried to do here, and we will do over the next 2 weeks as we get closer to our team, is identify roles. We still got 11 3-and-3s, so that's always a battle in terms of role definement and trying to have enough gas over a course of a 3-and-3 with a Sunday game where, we want to play up tempo, we want to play fast, and we certainly have been near the top of scoring here the last 3 years since I've come back as a head coach, and we'd love that to continue. In order to do that, you need to play a 4-line game. So I think there's going to be a lot of role definement here over the next 10 days or so with specific guys, and because there's some guys we just don't know about, and the big kid Bo is one of those examples. Has had a very good camp in Washington, has impressed a number of people. Conditioning is a little bit of an issue, so we'll have to work on that, but what role will he fit? Can he play power play? Can he play PK? We're not sure yet, and it's very difficult to judge. I'm watching him play a few shifts from last year in the World Championship. So those are the little things that we'll have to sort itself out over here the next 10 days.
How much of an emphasis was there to add some size, abrasiveness, grit, and whatever you want to call it, to the lineup this season?
Well, I think I said it in my post-game interview when we lost out to Providence that we could use a little bit more size, and I think we've tried to address that to some capacity. We did look to have a number of bigger bodies in Washington. So just depending on how this all plays out, the Grabovic kid up in Washington, he's a 6'5" center, but he's been very impressive up there, and I think he has a great chance of cracking the roster. So there are a couple bubble guys that would add size to Hershey, but not necessarily make it down here. Obviously, the Bo kid is here, and he's got some size to him, but he has played over in Europe, so we're not really sure what kind of physicality he's going to bring to the table, but certainly he's got a great reach. Didn't look intimidated up at the NHL level, so he might be a little bit of a surprise pick for us this year to add some size and bring a little bit of a different dimension to our lineup.
When you bring in a guy like Wayne Simpson, who breaks your heart last year, now you bring him in and sign him here, what kind of role are you looking at for him right now?
Well, as a coaching staff, obviously we let the higher-ups in Washington do their jobs, but, there's great communication between the upper management and our coaching staff. And, when you see a player once or twice a year, when they're asking your opinion, you kind of hold back a little bit because you don't want to judge a guy on one or two games because you're not sure. Maybe they played their best game of their life, and maybe they're not that good of a hockey player. But I think when you start seeing guys, 12 to 15 times, and they're pretty consistent, and they're coming to you on the bench quite a bit, to me, those are the guys you recommend. So Wayne Simpson, from a coaching side of things, in Hershey here, was one of the top guys that we were interested in bringing. It took a long time to get him because he had a number of things on the go, and so did Washington. But, when you play them 6 times and then 7 times in the playoffs, that's 13 opportunities to see him. He was highly recommended from our end, and we knew we were losing a lot of right shot right wingers. So I think he's going to be a great fit for us. Love how he plays a 200-foot game, and we're expecting big things from him.
The league had the same playoff format this year and gave you Charlotte in the division. Would you like to see any change in the playoff format this year?
Absolutely. I mean, they should have went 1 to 8 personally in terms of the conference. I know it was suggested at the league meetings and it got voted down. At least they should have had a crossover. And I know, there's travel costs and those type of things, but, we've played Providence in the playoffs. That's far.
Yeah.
2 years ago, we played Portland, which was in our division in the first round, and that was a 9-hour drive. So in terms of the financial component from our side of things, I don't see how it's a difference because, if they went 1 to 8, you could play Syracuse or you could play Bingo, and Bingo's a day trip for us. So someone ultimately usually gets screwed in terms of the playoff format if you go 1 to 8 with the financial implications. But to me, it should have been a 1 to 8 format. The 2 divisional wingers get first and second, and then let the 6 best teams play. Because again, from our perspective, we do usually have the strongest division in the league. We have an extra team to deal with and no crossover. And it's going to be a battle because the Pennsylvania teams are always good. Providence has been very competitive in all the years I've been in the American Hockey League, so it's not going to be easy.
You mentioned the division. Why do you think year in, year out this division is so strong in a league where it's not always possible to do that?
Well, I think that, when you look at the three Pennsylvania teams, I mean, Pittsburgh is always, battling at the NHL level, and Wilkes-Barre's been always competitive. And, I think the fan base also dictates you having a good team. And obviously, Lehigh had struggles early, but put a pretty good team together last year. And Province always seems to have good veteran players and is, a real good place to play. And I know a lot of people speak very positively. So, when you look at those four teams right there, it's just not easy. And, Hartford as well, they should be a major improvement this year. Keith McCambridge is a good coach, and they've signed a number of key players, from Schneider to Paul Carey, and, they got some young guys too. So they're not afraid to spend money with New York as well. So usually there's a good team in Hartford as well. So it's just, it's a battle.